everyone, and welcome to the Outfield Town Council meeting for Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019. I will go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Councilmember Dorenbecker. Here. Councilmember Durham.
Here.
Councilmember Moeller.
Here.
Vice Mayor Dorman. Here. Mayor Dunbar.
Here. And I'd like to ask one of our special guests, Supervisor Alfredo Pedroza, if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now I'd like to ask everyone to join us in a moment of silence. We lost a longtime resident, friend, and very active member of our community, Virginia Crow, who passed away just a short time ago. So I welcome all of you to join us in a moment of silence in her memory. Thank you very much. Move on to our adoption of the agenda. I don't believe we have any changes. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor? Please vote. Voting on the Pledge of Allegiance, it said there.
Oh, did it say that still?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
So we'll take that as
I'm
the
glad it was unanimous.
adoption of the agenda. That's what that vote really was. So we're going to move on to our proclamations. We have two proclamations this evening. And the first one is recognizing April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I invite Coach Bailey from the organization News to join me at the podium for the proclamation. Recognize April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
There you go.
The world has to hear us. I have a loud voice, but not that loud. There we go. Again, this is a proclamation recognizing April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Whereas the month of April 2019 is Sexual Assault Awareness Month in California and throughout the United States. This year's campaign is dedicated to raise public awareness about sexual violence and educate communities on how to prevent it. The campaign theme, I Ask, requires many voices and roles to relate the message of understanding and respecting consent. Asking for consent is a healthy, normal, and necessary part of everyday life. Whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month is intended to spread knowledge about that sexual violence is a widespread problem and how it impacts our community directly or indirectly. Sexual violence is prevalent and it can happen to anyone, and the impact on the survivor is long-lasting. I Ask is about every person being able to make consensual, respectful, and informed choices about their bodies and relationships. As individuals, we have a role to promote positive behavior, healthy relationships, and safe environments. Whereas Sexual Assault Victims Services, a program of News, has promoted healthy sexuality and prevention of sexual violence for over 35 years. It also provides 24-hour helpline service to survivors and their significant others, offers prevention education, responds to emergency calls, and offers support and comfort during forensic medical exams, also all criminal proceedings. News Sexual Assault Victims Services requests public support as it continues its effort to create a future where women, men, and children can live free from violence and exploitation. With leadership and dedication, we can promote healthy relationships and prevent sexual violence in the town of Yountville and throughout Napa County. In collaborations with News Sexual Assault Victim Services, we must work together to create change, increase education, awareness, and community involvement. Prevention is possible. Now therefore be it resolved, I, John F. Dunbar, on behalf of the Town Council, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2019 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in the town of Yountville. So, thank you for being here.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes.
Do you mind if I say a few?
Please do, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for supporting news in our effort to prevent sexual violence in our community. When leaders in our valley, like each of you, support these causes, it sends a message to the Napa community that these issues are important and each of us can play a role in prevention. With the rise of the Me Too movement, conversations about sexual assault are finally becoming a part of our everyday conversation. These are conversations we need to have in our community. With awareness and education, people are learning that sexual violence does not discriminate. It impacts the lives of individuals despite age, race, class, and gender, and it's happening in our community. News provides safety, hope, and healing for over 1,400 survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse in Napa County each year, and handles an average of 26 sexual assault cases. This number, unfortunately, is rising each year. Sexual violence is preventable, and consent is a concept that can be taught at any age. This year's theme, I Ask, builds on the idea that consent is a healthy, normal, and necessary part of everyday interactions. I Ask will champion the power of asking, whether it be asking to hold someone's hand, to give a hug, for permission to share personal information with others, or if a partner is interested in sex. It will also highlight the importance of listening to and accepting the answer no without pressuring someone to change their mind. During Sexual Assault Awareness Month, news will bring the theme of I Ask to life through our many educational outreach events across the Napa Valley. As we work towards a world free of sexual violence, we promote equality and respect for all. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you very much. We are also going to recognize for this month of April with a proclamation regarding Arts Month and in particular the Outfield Art Sip and Stroll event. I'm going to invite up the very recently retitled Chris D'Anatoli, President and CEO of Arts Council Napa Valley, to come up to the podium and receive this, and then you can also introduce some of the guests that you have with you tonight. So. Good to see you, Chris. This proclamation recognizes Arts in April 2019. Whereas the month of April has been recognized for the last 9 years as a countywide celebration of the arts and local culture known as Arts in April Napa Valley. Whereas the arts and culture enhance and enrich the lives of every resident and visitor to the Napa Valley and are supported by organizations, businesses, and individuals throughout Napa County. Whereas residents and groups worked together in 2008 to create Napa County's Community Cultural Plan that supports self-expression and recognizes the role the arts play in a healthy economy and in creating a sense of place. Whereas the Yountville Town Council has demonstrated its investment in the arts with the creation of the Yountville Arts Commission and programs such as the Yountville Sculpture Walk, the Gallery at the Community Center, and events like Art Sip and Stroll, Yountville Out Loud, and Shakespeare in the Park. Whereas Yountville is home to the Lincoln Theater on the grounds of the California Veterans Home, which is a comprehensive performing arts center committed to the cultural and artistic well-being of the Napa Valley, as well as the Napa Valley Museum, Yountville, which has been dedicated to providing unique experiences that enrich the cultural fabric of our community through exhibitions and educational outreach since 1972. Now therefore be it resolved, I, John F. Dunbar, on behalf of the Yountville Town Council, do hereby proclaim April as Arts Month in the town of Yountville and call upon our citizens to celebrate and promote arts and culture in Yountville all throughout the year. So thank you very much for representing Arts Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Dunbar. Thank you, Town Council. I'd also like to recognize Whitney and Vince, who are members of my board of directors, and also Kim and Jim, members of the Yountville Arts Commission, and my former colleagues on that commission. Super excited to kick off Arts in April in Yountville here tonight, and we'll be even more excited to join the closing weekend event of the Arts Sip and Stroll on April 27th. Arts Council Napa Valley has adopted a new strategic plan, and at the center of those goals is a mindset of equity. That is why it does not cost any money to participate in Arts in April this year. As long as the event is arts-centered, anyone can register their event on the Arts in April calendar at artsinapril.com. Also, as part of this new mindset, we have eliminated membership for our organization and created a new industry-serving program called Insider Link, and also the Creative Directory for Napa County, as a way for creatives to promote their work and get hired. This will also include opportunities within in the arts field, industry mixers, professional development, and best practices for artists trying to get hired. We are very excited about this new direction, and look forward to continue to serve the arts in Napa County as well as Yountville. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Chris. It's not too late to buy into the Art Sip and Stroll, I'm sure. And we're guaranteed to have beautiful sunny weather like we do every year. Almost guaranteed, let's put it that way. Okay, moving on to public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forward with a topic that is not on our agenda this evening? Seeing only arts folks going out to spread the arts and culture around the community, we'll move on to our consent calendar. We have 3 items on that consent calendar. Is there any action to be had? Meaning a motion.
I'll make a motion. We accept the consent calendar. I apologize.
Second.
Okay, please vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next up, we do have a presentation from the aforementioned supervisor, Alfredo Pedroza, who's going to present an update regarding the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and its CASA housing compact. Welcome, Supervisor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the council members. We did save the best for last, and you are last, and I mean that. So it's an honor to be able to serve you on MTC, representing our counties, our town, and our cities. I've had the grand honor of representing, I'm not sure if someone will control the clicker. If you do, thank you very much. I've had the honor of representing our county for a few years now, and recently had the honor of being elected vice chair of MTC, which is a great opportunity for Napa County, our cities, our town, to make sure we're leveraging that opportunity to maximize the most dollars that we can bring back home. So in the previous slide, and we don't have to go back, I'll just provide a quick overview. The idea behind this presentation is to give you all an overview of what MTC does, how we do it, recognizing that not everyone interacts with the MTC. At the local transit authority, we do interact, and you have some representatives there. But again, it was just to provide you an overview and also answer any questions that you may have. So a little bit about MTC. Our total budget for the Bay Area is over $2 billion. And let me just spend some time also talking about the composition of MTC. It's comprised of 29 commissioners, 18 voting members. It includes Napa County, Solano, Marin, San Francisco, Alameda, Contra Costa, San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Sonoma. I should have memorized them by now. And as you can see, we have the big counties, you have some of the smaller counties, you have the rural counties, you have the urban counties. And my job as your representative is to try to strike that balance and making sure that we do have to support our big counties and our big cities, and things like BART and the ferry service. They're all great for the regional transportation system. But it's also making sure they understand our needs as a smaller community and town, recognizing that we're a unique destination. We get 3.6 million visitors annually, and that presents us some unique transportation challenges and infrastructure challenges. But it's okay to look at the whole system as a whole. And the challenge that we all know as elected officials is you want to think locally, but act regionally. And sometimes that comes at a cost of making sure you're not compromising local control, and that's a balance that we need to strike. And so far, we've done a good job of making sure our colleagues at MTC understand the balance between local, regional, and making sure communities keep that charm that makes them so special, like Yountville. So a little bit about MTC. I call it the left side of the house. This is where we do long-range planning for the region, whether it's Plan 2040 or looking at the critical infrastructure needs well into the future. That's part of what MTC does. On the other side, though, is investing in the critical infrastructure projects. We run the bridges, so making sure that we are doing the retrofits as necessary, investing in, again, critical infrastructure projects that I'll talk about a little bit for Napa County. The other side of the house, kind of the middle right, is where we do things like Clipper. So who has a Clipper card? MTC runs that, and if we can make it more innovative, we should, and we're talking about that. That's also part of what MTC manages. And then the farthest right, which is kind of the newest side of the house, is the advocacy effort, making sure that we're advocating on your behalf up in Sacramento. As you all know, this administration has taken some very aggressive stance on housing and transportation. And as your representative, we need to make sure that they understand that, yes, there are some things that we can work together on, but there are some concerns we're going to have at the local level. So that's kind of a little bit about MTC, kind of that bird's eye view. A little bit about what the successes we've had. We've been able to secure over $9.3 million in transit and operating funds. We've had some success in highway funds as well. And as the MBTA representatives know, we've been able to secure some funding for alternative transportation and MBTA planning. One of the successes I point to is Regional Measure 3. The mayor and I talked quite a bit about this. As Numerical Valley will tell you, there's been a Regional Measure 1, Regional Measure 2. For the first time, Napa County got a specific line item in the expenditure plan. That had not happened before. And I will give credit where credit is due. Senator Bill Dodd was also instrumental in making sure Napa got their fair share. And we had some fellow commissioners who saying, why is Napa County getting $20 million? And our response is, well, why are you getting what's in the expenditure plan? So it's this constant negotiation in a fair and equitable way, but making sure Napa County got its fair share. So we got $20 million for State Route 37, which is going to help address some of the critical infrastructure projects we have. For those of you that remember the 2017 storms in State Route 37, how it closed, whether you believe in climate change or not, all I ask you is to flash back to that moment. It completely created some chaos in the region, created a diversion effect that we felt in Napa County, especially our partners in American Canyon. So in the expenditure plan for Regional Measure 3 is $100 million to address that issue. $100 million is not going to get us quite a bit. It's some of the environmental work that we have to do and maybe some advanced mitigation. But we're looking at options. We do have an MOU with MTC, Solano County, Napa County, Marin, and Sonoma to look at a comprehensive overview. Those of you that drive that corridor, you see the real-life implications of the workforce that's using it, the freight, and people like us. Not that you ever want to go to Sonoma, but we have enough here. But we do need to address that, and then also $250 million in competitive funds. And I will assure you we will get a piece of that bucket there. And we've already been working on ensuring that Napa gets our fair share. On the next slide, one of the critical projects that folks know, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I can tell you that when you create less disruptions, it leads to better traffic flow. And this right here in the current configuration has a stoplight. So imagine removing the stoplight, having free flow, and roundabouts in the bottom. That's really going to alleviate some of the congestion you see at that intersection now. Whether it's us coming into Napa, our workforce, or our visitors, that's a huge intersection, and I'm very satisfied that we're going to have some funding that can make sure that we deliver that project. Total project cost is $35 million. The next one, similar issue, right? You have a light there at the intersection. Again, we want to make it as hard as possible so that way people don't go to Sonoma. But the improvement that we are making, and you got to squint a little bit, is on the farthest right lane. That's going to be free flow, so that it will not be stopping at that light. Again, talking about disruptions and flow, that's a little close to $3 million project, but again, it's one of the capital infrastructure projects that we need to make sure our residents see the benefits of these capital infrastructure projects and the quality of life of them. Next slide. This is not an endorsement of the Vine Trail alignment. This is just acknowledging that MTC has played a role in securing funding for the Vine Trail. I'm personally supportive of it. I think the more that we can invest in alternative modes of transportation, the better that our residents and our workforce will have options for. Next slide. So this is part of a pilot program that I've been working on for quite some time. It was kind of the genesis was we can't keep trying the same thing. We have to use technology to try new things, to work smarter. So the example I use and the story I'll tell is Loom is a data analytics company. So we got $1 million from MTC to start this pilot, and I've asked the Napa Valley Vintners and Visit Napa Valley to also support this financially, and the idea was to work together. What Loom did is they worked with Amazon in Seattle. What Amazon was realizing is they were growing, and as most jurisdictions do, when you grow and you build more buildings, you require more parking spots, right? It's the right thing to do. Well, Amazon was saying, well, gosh, we keep having to build more parking lots for our employees, and everyone is coming in their individual cars. We need to know how our employees are getting to and from work. So they contracted with Loom. Loom analyzed their employee mobility. They looked at when their employees were getting to work, how they were getting to work. And after they aggregated all this, they realized that they had 100 employees living in a town 10 miles away. So what Amazon did, said, you know what, we're going to buy a bus, and we'll pay for it. And we'll compensate our employees the moment they get on that bus because they can be productive. So by understanding the data and how their employees moved, Amazon was able to remove 99, let's just round up, 99 cars off the road and put a bus. Now, we don't have a critical employer in Napa Valley that can move the needle like that, but what Loom is willing to do is work with her core employers, where if we aggregate the data, for example, the Meritage is a core employer in the South County, Hotel Yountville, let's just use them for a second, Trinchero Wine Estates. What if we aggregated all that data and we looked at what time their employees came to work, how they came to work, and what time they left to work? MTC believes that we would create a critical mass where we can provide alternative modes of transportation by incentivizing them. We first have to get the data to make sure we can provide solutions. And the fact is we may fail, but it's okay if we fail, but we have to use technology, and we have a good confidence threshold that we can make some improvements here. So that's part of the pilot. It's exciting. Again, I'm very supportive. I'm very appreciative of my colleagues at MTC willing to provide us $1 million to try something new in quiet Napa Valley. So a little bit about CASA. I know the mayor and I have spent some time on this, and I know as a former city council member, I understand local control and the importance of local control and how what makes communities special is the ability to legislate at a local level. So part of CASA was identifying that we do have a housing crisis, and if we can first acknowledge that, then we're starting from a good point. With that, though, it was creating a menu of options that could address the housing crisis that we have in the Bay Area, specifically in our community as well. You all have done a good job of building housing, and I appreciate that. Not every jurisdiction has. And not every jurisdiction can, recognizing the land use limitations we have in certain communities. So CASA, there's some things that do cause some concern for local jurisdictions, completely understand that. But something that you all have been working on is working with the Vets Home and making some of that space available for housing. CASA identified that as an opportunity as well. So right, that's where there's a perfect marriage. County of Napa has land as well. Caltrans has plenty of land. So it was unleashing these public lands for housing. There are some concerns about how you fund some of these things, recognizing that you can't take the tools away from local jurisdictions to do self-help measures like sales tax and so forth. Have some concerns about a regional enterprise, another committee being created in Sacramento or DC or San Francisco to tell us how to do housing. However, though, the idea behind this was we need to be at the table making sure we're helping craft sensible policy that works for us versus things happening to us. And that's part of the paradigm that we need to understand. So while MTC did not fully support this in its entirety, it recognized that there are things in here that we should address, like incentivizing good housing processes. And sometimes, I'll use the NIMBY word, sometimes that becomes a problem. And we need to make sure that we're addressing it in an appropriate fashion. So going back to what I said earlier about legislation, that's part of what MTC is also doing, is making sure we're up in Sacramento on your behalf, striking a good balance between thinking regionally, but not at the expense of local control and local communities. So I thank you for the opportunity to come before you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
You covered quite a bit in just a few minutes, so thank you.
It's the 5th time I've done this, so I've almost
Questions
memorized it.
for the supervisor? Anyone? I just wanted to, I'll ask a couple and highlight one thing, and it was very fair of you to recognize now Senator Dodd and his effort with MTC, but you were on that commission and helped make the $20 million happen for Napa County. So I know you're not going to sit there or stand there and say that, but you're the one that was representing Napa County and getting us that money, so thank you for that, first of all. Also, I just wanted to ask if you could touch very quickly back on the Soskel Junction, which was, I think, slide 7. Those of us, again, on the NVTA board are intimately aware of the details, but the bike and pedestrian component of that project, no, it's the
Farther
aerial
back.
with the 2 roundabouts, one more, there we go. Just recognizing that part of the effort was to allow alternative modes as part of this plan, which you can imagine is tricky when you have a couple highways intersecting.
Yeah, and again, you have to squint for the legend, but if you look up there, it talks about some of the improvements we're making to multimodal, right? Addressing, I think Sanjay's right behind me and he can address it more.
Yeah, there he is.
Well, since you've come here, and please introduce yourself and apologize for interrupting the supervisor, but that's all, I'm just kidding.
I'm Sanjay Mishra. I'm the engineering manager for NVTA. As you can see on the picture there, the red dots, the red dotted lines actually represents the bike and the ped route. And the only thing that's going to change here or under consideration is the right exit lane which comes to the roundabout on 221. That may not happen. That will be probably eliminated from the design because there is a safety concern. And other than that, the blue is the bike and ped route which continues to the Devlin Road. And that's how, this is the build alternative which actually was approved or actually changed from the very first alternative because of public comment to add all those bike and ped route.
Very good, thank you.
You have
We had to
more
bring the-
eyes than I do.
Yeah, we had to bring the expert in to get into the details.
Absolutely. The mayor was trying to stump me and you did, so thank you.
And could you also, the other question I had, is there, what is the status of the CASA Compact with MTC, and what is the future of that at this point?
Good question, and we just had a pretty robust discussion at our MTC meeting, and we are trying to identify what the next steps are. We did create a task force recognizing that some of our shortcomings on the CASA Compact is we didn't do enough outreach. So there has been a task force that's created to really identify there are things that are going to be happening at the state level, and we need to make sure that we have a body that can have a discussion around it. So part of it will be this task force that was created to have a discussion as legislation is occurring in Sacramento. Beyond that, MTC will not have a role to play on the CASA Compact. It was addressed, it was created, and it's a menu that jurisdictions have to choose from. Again, recognizing that under this administration, who has been very aggressive on housing, we expect a lot of things to be happening in Sacramento. Our goal is to make sure that we're there addressing the concerns. We've all heard some of the statements that have been made by our governor about potentially withholding or holding back SB1 funding in 2021. That's a huge concern from a transit authority also to a local jurisdiction. So those are things that we're going to be fighting very aggressively on. I think the idea, Mayor, around it is how can we start incentivizing housing to be built? Recognizing that as local electeds, we can't make sure a building goes vertical. We can incentivize the process, but that's up to the builders, right? So we need to make sure that we're held accountable for what we control, but then there's also an equal responsibility from Sacramento to make sure that if they want to be pretty bullish on housing, there's also things that are holding up projects like CEQA, right? And if we want to address it, maybe there's CEQA reform that needs to be addressed in Sacramento as well. So again, I don't see MTC playing any more of a role than what we have in the past.
Okay, thank you. Any last thoughts? Again, thank you for being here and giving us the details.
Perfect.
And I'm glad that we had some NVTA representation to join you. Thank you
They
very
don't
much.
leave me stranded. Thank
That's
you,
right.
Sanjay. And thank you to Jesus Tejero from the County of Napa for joining us. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. So we do not have any public hearings this evening on our agenda, which is somewhat unusual, but that's quite all right. We're going to move ahead to our administrative regular item, which is related to our municipal code, an introduction and potential waiving of the reading of a code regarding rental property regulation. So we get
Yes.
Gary involved here.
Yes, Mayor and council members. Before you tonight is the introduction of waiving the first reading of an ordinance regarding rental property regulations. This actually incorporates into the previous rental registration ordinance. There's still a section of this chapter that's in the municipal code that's not included in the document before you. That requirement continues as it was with the previous ordinance. This does add some new provisions to the ordinance that have been authorized by the Ninth Circuit, a federal appellate court that oversees California. This was a case that came out of Santa Monica. City of Santa Monica passed an ordinance using very similar language that's before you this evening. Home Away challenged that ordinance as violating federal law. There is a federal law, the Decency Act, which says you can't hold an online provider liable for third-party postings on that site. And that's the same law that prevents someone from suing Facebook for defamation for something you post on there. It also applies to third parties who post things like prohibited short-term rentals here in town. So these companies have for a long time resisted subpoenas and various ordinances throughout California, and in fact local jurisdictions throughout the United States on the basis of this law. There's now a ruling that says you can require them at the point that they are completing a transaction to confirm whether or not the property that's being rented is permissible in that jurisdiction. And so the distinction that the court drew was you're still not monitoring online conduct. Anyone can post whatever they want, but at the moment that you're completing the transaction, you need to confirm whether or not it's permissible in that jurisdiction. So the ordinance in Santa Monica was upheld as not violating federal law, and now some jurisdictions are taking the opportunity to similarly regulate these online platforms. So before you this evening is some changes to the definitions. A residential rental unit now expressly includes a second residential unit. There's a definition of hosting platform, and there's some slight revisions to landlord as well. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and then I have one suggested amendment for the council to what's before you.
Questions of the report?
One quick question.
Yes,
Sorry.
Councilmember Durham.
Thank you. I've had locals who are trying to understand the rental ordinance. Can you just give me an example of an offline platform?
Yes. So anyone who acts as a matchmaker between a landlord and a tenant and charges a fee for that matchmaking would be a hosting platform under this ordinance. If they are exclusively online, they would only be required to comply with 8.08070 A, B, and C as it's currently written, so that the ordinance complies with the Decency Act and federal law and the court ruling. But yes, so there are, presumably, it could be a brick and mortar business that goes out and rents your property on your behalf and charges a fee for putting the two people together.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Property management company.
Correct.
I have a,
Questions, Councilmember Mueller?
so how, or what do we need to change within the town to, after, let's assume this passes, about practices that we're doing now versus how something might change based on this?
Yeah, so there's already a list that's been generated of all the long-term rentals that are permitted. There's a list of all the permit numbers, and that's already a list that the town creates. That will be sent to the online providers and will also be published on the website so that they can access it and check whether or not they're actually booking for long-term rentals that are permitted here in town. And then on top of that, I think there'll be some outreach to the different companies, and I'll let Steve jump in.
Yeah, I think for the most part, what we will be doing is letting them know of our rules, the requirement for the permit number, and the strict prohibition against 30 days. So the biggest change is going to be they can't complete a transaction for less than 30 days. And then they will be sending us information on the properties, and we will be able to review to see that they're consistent with the rental registration. So this is really a very powerful tool because we've been handcuffed by the transactions and the platforms by simply them not providing information, because we've always said we'll do the research, we'll do the analysis, but so I mean the neat thing here is, you know, if you want to use VRBO for a long-term transaction, that's completely legitimate and legal in Yountville. We still want to know who's doing it. We'll track against the rental registration ordinance. So for most people that are following the rules, and I am going to use the term following the existing rules, there's very little change in behavior or impact for them. For those that are not, then there's the broader potential that they're going to have to come up with a different approach to doing something they shouldn't do. And I'm not going to be naive and tell you that people won't try to figure out another way to game the system, but by at least the platform not being able to post, advertise, and complete the transaction, that's going to eliminate a significant portion of the activity that we know, I'm told by residents, is going on that we haven't been able to track and classify. The other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but I think we also are cleaning up to allow that advertising for less than 30 days is a violation, because we've had a couple efforts where we went after folks and the language that booking and just the fact that they were advertising wasn't sufficient enough. So, this gets us to a point that if, because we do monitor the advertising in a variety of sources, and if somebody is advertising short-term, that would be a violation, very clear.
Any other questions? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Bell and Mr. Rogers. So I'm going to pick up where the town manager left off. We are adding language that is new and is a substantive change, because now it is a violation of the code to advertise a short-term rental.
That's correct.
Okay. And then I just want to make sure that I understand. Let me get my questions up here. So there's, the way it's currently proposed, an internet-only residential leasing business would have to do 3 new things, which are spelled out in 8.08070, A through C. Correct?
Correct.
But then if there is a residential leasing business that doesn't use the internet, or like possibly a local or regional realtor uses internet and person-to-person, they will have to do 4 new things. They have to do the 3 for the internet only, plus they can't advertise.
Correct.
And then individuals who are leasing their own property have 1 new thing, is that they cannot advertise in any medium short-term rentals.
Sorry, say that one more time.
They can't advertise short-term rentals.
And who is they?
Individuals.
Correct.
And this advertising is in any medium,
Correct.
not just on the internet. They can't put an ad in the paper. They can't tell their friends.
Correct.
Okay. So,
Vice Mayor, I just want to clarify one.
Okay.
Since we have people out there that may not fully understand, when you refer to short-term, you're referring to rentals of less than 30 days.
correct. Currently
People can
prohibited.
still advertise for rentals over. I just wanted to clarify.
Absolutely, absolutely. They cannot advertise currently prohibited rentals. So, could you give me an example for someone like a local or a regional realtor? What will be the differences in their habit and practice? What would they have to do differently under the proposed ordinance? What would they have to do that they're not already doing? And what would they be prohibited from doing that they may be doing?
You want me to?
Go
I'll
ahead.
take.
Let's go Gary first, and then
Yeah, so I mean, I don't fully know what all of their business practices are, so it's a little bit of a complicated question. But the way the ordinance is drafted, for a long-term rental, they would need to include the rental permit number in that advertisement. Previously, that was only landlords. That's now hosting platforms too. They would not be allowed to advertise short-term rental units. The reason for that is they're prohibited. You don't have a right to commercial speech for something that's illegal. And then they would also be required to regularly report to the town how many bookings, who's booking, the length of stay. They would be, and this goes to the change that I'm proposing, so I'm hesitant to say this, but completing a booking transaction for short-term rentals within the town, and also cross-reference it with, for long-term rentals, cross-reference it with the registry of permitted ones in town before completing that transaction. Those are the requirements. And before we go any further, just for one change that I'm proposing here, and I'll explain myself and why. Subdivision D of 8.08.070 says that exclusively on the internet hosting platform only needs to comply with subsection A, B, and C above. I'm going to recommend removing B from that requirement, and my reasoning is I think it's a close call, but we can't require them to monitor online content, and I think having to determine whether or not something is short-term is close to that. And in any event, they have to say everything they're booking, and they can't complete the transaction anyway unless it's on the registry. So I think the town gets there anyway, and it takes that risk out of it. So I'm going to recommend removing B from subdivision D there.
You're saying B as in boy.
B as in boy from subdivision D of 8.08070.
But not deleting B completely.
Correct. So someone who doesn't operate online as a hosting platform would still need to comply with subdivision B.
And so with that change, B 8.08.070, B like boy, would remain, and an internet-only business would not be subject to it.
Correct.
But a business like a local or regional realtor or property management company would be subject to it.
Correct.
So if it doesn't make a material difference, why would we not just take it out and go with A and C and leave it alone? And just say everybody's subject to the same thing?
Certainly could. Yep.
I mean, am I right that it does not make a material difference, or
Well, I
am I
think
wrong about that?
No, I think the same reasoning applies to brick and mortar as online, which is you have to turn over all the data of all the transactions you've completed, and you can't complete the transaction unless it's on the registry. I think it pretty much gets the town there, whether or not B is in there. But I think it is permissible to require B of brick and mortar hosting platforms should the council choose to.
And then one final question on the 8.08.010, the purpose. I know we had some discussion about this when we first put this on the books. Does it do any violence to this if we take out the purpose section?
No.
Because it seems to me it could constrain us in some ways, because we're saying it's because we are doing it to more effectively enforce the town's ordinances with limited resources. It just seems to me that that may put us in a box we don't want to be in, so I'm just asking, is it necessary?
The purpose section's not necessary, and the reason why it's in there is the original conception of the rental registration ordinance included an inspection component, the purpose of which was to identify code violations and code enforcement issues, and it was held over when the inspection component was removed and the ordinance was amended during that meeting. And so now that we're going back to amend the ordinance again, amended that language a little bit, but no, the purpose is not a required part of the ordinance.
What authority do we have to enforce and potentially fine these third-party hosting platforms? I mean, so if somebody violates it and we say you're violating it and they say too bad.
Well, jurisdiction over someone who violates an ordinance is someone who reaches into the town to do business. So collecting from them is likely going to be, or could be difficult, I could say. Nevertheless, it would be a violation of the municipal code if they were to complete these transactions that weren't on the registry and didn't hand over the information. Enforcement is another issue.
It would be challenging.
Yeah.
It would be more challenging if we didn't have the language in there saying you couldn't do it.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Other proposed? Yes. Councilmember Durham.
So, hosting platform responsibilities. B is a responsibility. Why are we removing it?
So I'm recommending one of two things. Either that we amend subdivision D so that an online platform doesn't have to comply with B.
Why?
Because federal law says we can't require them to monitor online content.
But
and I think
sorry, go on. Sorry.
And I think this is a closer call than A or C, because in order to determine whether or not it's a short-term rental, you'd have to analyze what the thing is being advertised for and come to some conclusion, which requires some monitoring.
But, so let me understand this then. HomeAway is owned by Expedia. Expedia rents hotel rooms. HomeAway rents homes. Do we not have the ability to tell HomeAway that we do not allow home rentals under 30 days? Therefore, you shall not complete any booking transaction for any short-term rental unit within the town?
So I think it's a close call.
Yeah.
And that's why I think with A and C in place, we'll already get there because they're going to have to disclose all the booking transactions they've engaged in, and the short-term rental presumably isn't going to be on the registry anyway because they're only registering long-term rentals and they're already on the town's radar. So,
and because I asked, I mean, I had to sign a contract with Expedia. Anybody going on to HomeAway has to sign a contract with them as well, or Airbnb, or with any of the rental sites. So therefore, it just is interesting to me that we can't tell them, we don't allow that here. So on that contract, it should say 30 days for Yountville.
yeah, the question is the question actually under federal law is what it requires them to do.
Okay.
And so if it requires them to monitor actively all of the things on their site that might violate any law at any given time, the federal government has decided we are not going to require online anyone, Facebook, any of these folks, to actively monitor the billions of postings that are on there for any possible violation of law. And so to the extent the ordinance imposes a requirement to monitor actively, that's where it gets into a possible issue. And so I think it is a close call because it's at the time of the booking transaction. So presumably they're not doing anything until they're asked to actually close the deal. Even so, I think they might argue that.
I understand completely. And just one last point. It is only 10:07 and we have till 10 o'clock.
Sure.
So it's interesting, though. I choose to go on to Facebook as an individual, but I sign a contract with HomeAway, and the federal government is still saying it's not HomeAway's responsibility to manage the activities of which they're receiving a fee for?
Yes.
Wow.
It's the Online Decency Act, and the lobbyists for online platforms of all sorts have lobbied very hard for this. And because, under traditional defamation law, you can go after the person who made the statement and the people who republished it and the people who republished it after that, and so on and so forth. And so under all these state laws that have been around since long before the internet, you can go after everyone in that chain, presumably. And so this law went into effect to say we're just not going to hold the online folks responsible for what third parties post on there.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Or member of the public want to comment? Not yet, not on this one. Maybe on another one coming up. Okay, so this is proposed as an introduction and waiving of the reading. There's been discussion about potentially modifying the content as presented. Is anyone prepared to recommend a motion on this? I'm thinking the Vice Mayor, since you had some content changes, if you're interested in doing that.
Thank you, yes. I would like to move to introduce and waive the first reading of ordinance number 19-482, amending Chapter 8.08 of Title 8 of the Outfield Municipal Code regarding rental property regulations with the following changes to the version presented to us tonight. Delete the purpose section, which is 8.08.010. Delete 8.08.070, B like boy, in its entirety, and make the necessary parallel changes to D.
And I'm just waiting to get either Gary and or Michelle to say you got all that. Gary, you got that?
I believe so.
Michelle, you're good? Okay, and I believe Councilmember Dornbecker just seconded that motion. Any further discussion or questions? Please go ahead and vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we have a staff informational report on some redwood trees up at Yountville Community Park.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Helping to fill in the absence of Public Works Director Joe Tagliabashi, I'll be presenting with assistance from Muni Operations Manager Larry Hancock. Really what we're presenting today is just a broader information about the status of the health of two significant redwoods in Yountville Community Park. The town has tried to take a more aggressive maintenance effort and program with regard to these trees as they came out of the longer period of the drought. You have a more detailed arborist report that goes into some better detail, but what we're continuing to define is that two of these particular trees are continuing to show signs of distress. So we've been attempting, and the report goes into some level of detail, special treatments, injections to try to improve the vigor and care. We're now at the point where we're recommending a topping, which would affect two of the trees, and in this particular clump there's 5. We've also learned more that there is a soil condition that the two are on, that they are actually on a section with bedrock, so they're really only sitting in 3 or so feet of soil. So really what we're attempting to do here is a lot of measures short of taking the tree down, and that's why we're here to share with you. One, we know that these trees are significant. Secondly, we also know that everybody loves a tree until they don't. And then we have a love-hate relationship with trees, and especially trees that could potentially fall and have a negative impact. So we're trying to look at a measured course here, and the measured course would be to top the trees, to continue to allow those two trees to live out longer. You know, we've seen top trees in Yountville and other areas thanks to the efforts of PG&E, and there is some shaping and recovery. But we think right now this is a good interim solution short of taking the trees down, and we've been resisting that. So I don't know, Larry, if you want to add anything more about the site condition. We've shown you several pictures in the staff report of how the trees had looked about 5 years ago, and you know, I have to admit, as a person that's up here quite a bit, looking at those pictures, or up at the park quite a bit, looking at the pictures was very telling, because to me, just in my visits, it doesn't seem like it's that stark a change, but yet the photos that we have from our periodic management, it's hard to argue what you're looking at there. So anyway, yeah. Larry?
And Larry, if you're able to, when you come up, identify how tall they will remain, how much we're talking about cutting off, and what that will do visually.
I couldn't tell you 100% for sure what it's going to be, just by looking at the pictures and the height of them, and seeing about where I think they would probably cut them, probably about a third, quarter to a third.
Off the top, you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
So at least 2/3 of the tree we're anticipating anyway will remain.
Right.
But until they get up there and they start cutting off some of the most impacted areas, as we've seen in other trimming of trees in town, they get into branches and see rot, see disease, other things, they may have to go a different direction.
Be pure speculation on my part, but I don't think you're going to find that up there.
Okay.
I would say, Mayor, you're making a good, the nature of this tree, because of the true linear nature, rather than a lot of the branching, sorry for my hieroglyphics, but in this case it goes, really if you look at we're going to keep most of the foliage where it's robust, so you're going to top it at that point, and the part that's barren and sort of missing and then a few scrabbly, that's what's going to get cut off, so that when you're visually looking, you're still going to see the fill for and I think the 2/3 is probably a good illustration.
Okay. Do you have any more details? Go ahead.
I didn't think about it until this afternoon, but there's to the east, or to the west, northwest corner of the park, there's a set of redwoods that had the same problem, that got the same treatment, and they're still holding. So, you know, to me, it's the ground issue more than the water or anything else. It's just sitting on 3 feet of soil over hard rock, so.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions about this? This is informational. You're going forward with this, and so thank you for
We
just
will
educating
also-
us on that.
Yes, and we will also be putting some signs up, as we've done in other situations, to let people know what we're doing, because we do know that people are concerned about this, and we have on our end the responsibility to try to care and maintain the trees, and then when it's not appropriate, we need to also take them down. But in this case, we have some informational signage that will go up explaining the treatments, the history, and what we're doing.
And there is a safety concern here. If something were to topple over, it's adjacent to our children's play area, not to mention on the other side, we've got some homes not that far away.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you. We
And
always
Larry,
like to,
thank you for joining us tonight.
yeah, we always like to keep you later than even normal, than you already are. Thank you, Larry.
One other informational update, which is just a good positive news one, is that this week starts the pothole and preliminary work of the Yount Street pavement project. So they'll be getting the preliminary work and then getting ramped up in early May for the repaving. So you'll see some work out there along Washington, or along Yount Street from the intersection at Washington to the Hopper Creek Bridge and Mount Street area. So all told, when we complete the waterline project, which you just provided the notice of completion, this project, the town will have invested a little over $1 million in public infrastructure in that segment. So the short answer in a way is that you can kind of visually realize how far your money goes or doesn't, depending on how one wants to look at the perspective. But a major significant infrastructure that's going to have the water system will have a 50-year life cycle. The complete reconstruction of the street will give us a good 35 years, plus with our approach now with a more aggressive microsurfacing, we really should see that. And for those of you that follow our famous PCI index scores, this section, we're currently at a 76, and you all should take great pride in the fact that we have the highest rated roads in Napa County. This has the potential to get us very close to an 80, which also gives you more control over some of your state funding and structure, or if not, probably with our next cycle of street projects get us over that.
Great. Any questions on that? Okay. We're going to move on to our council meetings. I've asked Councilmember Moeller to start off with something that's been very timely and concerning. Larry, thank you. Not Larry. You're not concerning. Upper Valley Waste Management and the situation at Clover Flat. If you would start with that report, please.
Okay, thank you. So yesterday we had over a 3-hour emergency meeting of the Upper Valley Waste Management Board. So I wanted to give you an update. We did have a couple council members attend, so this might be a new summary, the same summary for them. Our board's been very busy first following up on regulatory directives that we got after the fires at Clover Flat last summer. And these regulatory directives, they came from the County Legal Enforcement Agency. I'll call that the LEA from now on. And they have regulatory authority over Clover Flat, the landfill. From the fire, what they've issued, the company has not, they've only partially resolved those issues, and they have more to comply with even from those directives. One of the major things is that Clover Flat has lacked for quite some time now a full-time site manager, and the company is required to hire one ASAP, and also to complete fire suppression system. So as we've been dealing with that, about 2 weeks ago, the LEA inspector, during a regular periodic inspection of Clover Flat, discovered several locations where leachate, that just means contaminated water, was oozing out of multiple areas of the landfill and causing erosion, carrying contaminated leachates from the landfill area to a nearby creek, which drains into Dutch Henry Creek, which drains into the Napa River. So the LEA directed Clover Flat to resolve this issue by stopping the flow of the water, the leachate into the water, collecting it into tanks, and taking various other actions. However, the problem continued to persist, so on March 30th, the LEA directed that the landfill be closed to accepting any waste, which was then amended, thank you, Steve Rogers, to being closed to accepting only public self-haul waste, but still open to collect franchise waste. Franchise waste is our waste that we all get in our brown cans and gets hauled up there. So we wanted to make that amendment so that we didn't create another potential health hazard by having all this uncollected garbage in town. In addition to the LEA, the Regional Water Quality Control Board has issued a notice of violation with a likely order to abate on the way. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife is also discussing taking regulatory actions against the Napa County District Attorney. The LEA has provided Clover Flat with a deadline, which was 2 hours ago, 5 p.m. today, to provide an action plan and complete various actions at which the LEA staff will review this and make a decision about whether they will not only close it to the public, but also perhaps to our UVS trash trucks. There's also this is just some short-term fix. There's also medium and longer-term fix. We have to wait for the rains to stop, for things to dry out. So this is just immediate problems. The company also provided a pretty extensive report on what they've been doing to mitigate all this, including collecting the contaminated water into tanks. Some of these tanks were actually there to help fill up with water to mitigate the fires, and now they're full of leachate. So we still have to get more tanks in to take care of the potential fires, because October's not that far away, and these tanks take a while. So it's estimated that all these problems are probably going to cost about $1 million. The company is totally responsible for that. We only, our main contract and what affects our rates are the collection of the garbage. So, and also everybody along the creeks have been notified. So, because there was some questions and concern about possible contaminated groundwater or other drinking water, that does not seem to be an issue. So, in the event that the landfill would be closed to our franchise waste, the company has indicated that it could still pick up our garbage, but that it's going to take them a lot longer to take the garbage down to the transfer station at Devlin Road. So instead of picking up garbage Monday through Friday, they might have to go to a 7-day system instead of 5. Also, if that were to happen, we're going to have a communication plan to customers. We're going to use robocalls that the company has every customer's number. You might get a robocall. There might be press releases. There's always Next Door Yountville, social media, etc. So we're going to have another emergency meeting this Friday at 1:30, Yountville Town Council Chambers, to talk about what corrective actions and possible breaches to the contract in a little more detail. We might have a closed session as well. And hopefully we'll get an update on the water quality sampling and monitoring results. So that's where we are now.
Okay. Councilmember Durham.
A quick question. It was my understanding that the company felt that they had already abated a lot of these issues, even coming into yesterday's meeting. Is that correct?
That was their presentation, yes. And so now this future corrective action plan is to be part of that. The LEA is going to go back for another inspection, and they'll have their opinion.
So it still stays open to all the franchises until the LEA makes a final decision?
That final decision, they're having discussions probably as we speak. We'll know in the morning.
Thank you.
Any other questions about that report? Thank you for continuing to monitor that. That is a concern, I'd say, to say the least. And we have no idea at this point, I suppose, how this impacts our May 18th townwide cleanup day, if that's even going to be possible, or if we may need to postpone or cancel that. We'll just have to wait and see.
We'll just sell it all at the garage sale the week
Yeah,
before.
we'll just take it over to Jeff and Joey's, I think would be the plan. That'd be our contingency plan.
Once we know definitively, we'll be able to tell all of our residents, because certainly I know folks get prepared for weeks ahead of time to get out that debris.
Mayor, you're correct, and I think what we need to just do is monitor the situation. If it's resolved, then there'll be no issues, and if not, we'll come up with a contingency or a delay in when most likely I would recommend a delay in the cleanup day rather than a cancellation.
Right. Yeah, Councilmember Durham's yard isn't that big to handle all that. Okay, thank you for that report. I don't know if we have a Watershed Information and Conservation Council report, correct? No report? No report, right? I don't know why I looked this way, but I did. League of California Cities update, just two very quick things. One is Legislative Action Day will be April 24th. I was just hearing that Councilor Dornbecker is going up. I'm not sure if anyone else is, but I'll be there.
Garbage stuff.
And we'll be spending the entire day up there going to speak to our legislators on various issues. Also, for the North Bay Division of the League, at our May 16th meeting in Vallejo, we will have Senator Scott Wiener there, and he is one of the most, I would say, aggressive and progressive housing advocates in the Capitol. So it will be a good opportunity for us to talk directly with Senator Wiener about his legislation and getting our voices out there for what it means to the North Bay and to Napa County in particular. That's basically what's happening with the League. I'll go on to other reports and announcements. One, Yountville Little League opening day was just this last Saturday. So a lot of very happy and very energized young baseball players out there. I wanted to recognize the Yountville Kiwanis group for yet again this year being out there with the pancake breakfast and supporting Little League. I want to commend Samantha Holland. She and I were both successful with throwing perfect, I will say perfect, first pitches. Nobody was harmed in the serving of our first pitches, so that's good. And again, thanking the town and Yountville Kiwanis for supporting the brand new scoreboard that really does look great out there at Canishara Field. The last thing I had is NVTA board meeting that was held on March 20th. The board approved, staff gave the authorization for them to move forward to determine specific funding sources for the transit bus maintenance facility. They're trying to figure out how to fund, I think it's $11 million shortfall in this $30+ million project. And one way is to redirect $4 million in transportation funds, but that's not a very popular idea with at least part of the board. So they're being tasked with going back and putting a complete and total funding package together for consideration by the board at a future meeting. That's all I have. Any other reports
I have
or announcements?
a quick
Councilmember
one. I
Nolan?
attended environmental quality league policy meeting last week in Irvine. And again, on the same subject, garbage. We are finally working on a bill. As everyone knows, the National Sword program in China, a lot of our recyclables are no longer being shipped, spewing smoke in the air across the ocean. I'm not too sad about that, but so some of the recyclings do not have markets now, and a lot of the waste haulers are having to pay. I don't know where they're going, but somebody's taking them away. So there's a bill working through the legislature right now that we're going to try to have a source reduction of plastics that we can no longer recycle. It's not until they're suggesting a 70% reduction by 2030 I think that's a little long to make any of that happen. So anyway, we're working on that. All the communities all over California and many communities in the United States are dealing with the same thing. They just, a lot of these things that we have no markets for, we're actually you separate it out and you put it in your blue bin, and now we're throwing it in the landfill, which is leaking. So it's complicated.
I'm not sure I want any more reports from you tonight.
Sorry.
Councilmember Dornbecker, did you have a report also?
I do. We met on Friday, the 29th in Costa Mesa, and at first we had a joint meeting with Government Transparency and Labor Relations relating to the CAL FIRE decision by the California Supreme Court, which clarified when and how benefits become vested, and in doing so ruled that airtime, apparently at CAL FIRE, they were able to purchase airtime, which meant that they were getting credit for time not worked, but it was being added toward their pension consideration. And the court found that the legislature had no intention of creating a permanent right to airtime. That's one of the things. 200 bills have been introduced dealing with housing, and the governor wants to adjust short-term RENA goals upward and tie entitlements to transportation, for example, SB1, to those RENA numbers. Also, we covered the governor's budget update showing that the state has seen a moderate recovery, but growth is slowing, and among the results of that finding, ongoing commitments to new projects are capped at $3 billion, and a recession scenario is being discussed with an estimated $7 billion in losses over 3 years as an estimate for the state. The governor does, however, want to look at expanding the earned income tax credit for families to help them out. And AB 992 seeks to increase benefits for workers through workers' comp. The League opposes that bill. The budget contains $555 million for disaster relief, and the core issues for local government are land use and budget impacts.
There you go. Thank you for that report. I believe that does it for our business for tonight. So I entertain a motion to adjourn to our next regular meeting of Tuesday, April 16th at 6 p.m. There is a motion and a second. I think we can count on a unanimous vote on this one. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Good night.